So now, let's go to the, let's say, implementation part, AAA for device administration. So authentication and authorization, I want to speak now about only device administration. So let's see what are the configuration options, and let's go to the implementation side as well to see how would you go ahead and configure that to begin with. So authentication and authorization can be done locally by the router or remotely via AttackX+. You get to choose. And in general, you're going to perform both of them. You're going to make sure that the router is going to have a primary method like the AttackX+, and in the case AttackX+, let's say is no longer available for whatever reason, the server had a problem, or maybe in the case that a router can no longer access the AttackX server, then it's going to fall back on local authentication. So you can either define to authenticate users trying to connect remotely from managing the router to be authenticated locally or remotely via AttackX+, or you can use both of them at the same time and prefer one of them, which in general is going to be AttackX+. Then you also have two types of authentications. It's going to be, so when the user is going to connect to the router or the firewall or the switch to get access for managing it, then you're going to have two types of authentications available to be configured for the user. One is going to be the login authentication, which is gonna, if the user passes the login authentication, then he gets logged in successfully to the router or to the device, and in general he's gonna get access to what is called user mode. I'm gonna speak in a couple what exactly user mode is. From the user mode, the problem is that a user cannot do a lot of things, cannot configure the router or the switch or the ASA firewall. Not all commands are available. So then if the user wants to be more privileged, to get access to more commands, then he needs to get into privilege mode, where to get access to that mode, it needs to use the enable authentication method. So it depends if the user has to authenticate only once or twice. You're going to see also in a couple. It depends on what the user wants to do on the router, if he's going to need access to user mode or to privilege mode. Likewise, we have two types of authorizations. One which is called exec authorization, which if the user is going to get authenticated, and then the AttackX server is going to authorize the user for exec access, or the local authorization is going to do that, because as I said it before, both authentication and authorization can be done locally by the router or remotely via AttackX+. So let's suppose I'm going to do it remotely. So it means that once the user is going to pass the authentication successfully, let's say the login authentication, then the AttackX server is going to grant the user access to exec mode. That's going to be exec authorization, which just allows the user access to the shell of the router of the device, and also is going to be assigning to the user a privilege level. Also, we have what is called command authorization, which I'm going to make use of that in order to authorize or actually restrict user access to specific commands on the router. So once the user has been authenticated to the router and authorized to get access to the exec, to the shell of the router, then maybe I want to restrict which commands are available to the user. And accounting can only be done remotely via AttackX+. There is no way that the router can account for commands typed by the user locally. There is no way via AAA. There's another way, which is a subset, a sub-feature of the archive feature, which is used by the router, let's say, to constantly save its configuration file on a remote FTP server. So a subset of the archiving feature is going to be allowing the router to log locally and keep in specific text files which users have typed which commands on the router's CLI. But that has nothing to do with regular AAA model. It's a different type of configuration. So speaking about just AAA configuration, there's no way you can configure the router to do local accounting. Only remote accounting on AttackX server.